Top 5 Humorous Folklore Ghost Stories, performed by Otis Jiry. Number 5. Adventures on the Rogue, an Oregon Tall Tale. We were upriver with the tour group looking at all the natural beauties here on the Rogue River when I spied a young Sasquatch hiding in the shadow of a tree near a gravel bank. I swung the tour boat around so we could get a better look, and all the tourists exclaimed and took pictures. It's not too unusual to see a Sasquatch in the spring. That's the time they migrate through here to their summer stomping grounds up north. We were in for a treat today. The Sasquatch jumped out of the shadows suddenly, leapt into the river, and wrestled a 7-foot sturgeon onto the gravel bank. I blinked in astonishment. I didn't know Sasquatch liked sturgeon. As we watched, the Sasquatch belted the big fish with a rock to stop its flopping. Right at that moment, a big black bear came stomping down the bank on the opposite shore, looking for a snack. The bear took one look at the Sasquatch with the sturgeon, sitting on the opposite shore, and leapt into the river. In the blink of an eye, that old bear was across the river and wading out of the water, while the tourists babbled and took pictures. The bear shook itself dry like a dog, and then jumped onto the back of the Sasquatch, beating on him until he ran away from the sturgeon, leaving the bear to sniff in triumph over the large fish. Well, I thought that was the end of it, until the Sasquatch came running back down the hill, holding a dead tree in his hands. He started beating on the bear, and the bear was whomping back at him something fierce. Fur was flying everywhere. Blood spurted out like a geyser. I don't know where it would have ended if I hadn't waded in there and broke it up. Number 4. Christmas Gift, a Florida folktale. Away down south, an old custom dictates that if someone comes up to you on Christmas Day and says, "Christmas gift," before y'all do, why, y'all are obligated to give that person a present. Mind you, the custom does not say what sort of present y'all should give, but those of us who hail from the South consider ourselves to be gentlefolk. The gifts given and received in this manner are good enough to keep the custom alive and well. Now, this is not to say that the custom does not have its drawbacks. Why, the devil himself got a hold of the eastern coast of Florida in this manner. The devil, being a canny fella, knew that God was walking about Florida one Christmas Day, so he hid himself behind a stump. When the Lord came strolling by, the devil jumped out real fast and said, "Christmas gift." And the Lord, being as fine a Southern gentleman as you could meet, held up his end of the custom and told the devil, "You can have the East Coast," and continued his stroll. So now the devil plays hurricane games with the East Coast of Florida whenever it pleases him. Number 3. Ghosts on the Tracks, a Colorado ghost story. The train rumbled around him as he adjusted the throttle. The night shift was always the toughest, in the engineer's mind. He had rumbled through Tempest a few minutes ago and was on his way to Thatcher. Not a bad stretch of road, and there was no better train in the entire Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe Railroad. He stretched a bit and yawned, trying to stay alert, and then he gasped. The lights had picked up the figure of a beautiful woman with long, red-gold hair and beautiful blue eyes standing near the tracks. Too near. He sounded his horn to warn her away, and then he realized that the light was shining right through her. She was a ghost. She stepped into the center of the track, laughing and beautiful. She disappeared seconds before the train rushed through her. And then there she was, in the engine cab next to him. The scent of roses filled the air. He stared at the ghostly vision, bewitched by her beauty. With an enticing smile, she wrapped ghostly arms around his neck and kissed him. and was gone. Dazed and disappointed, the engineer finished the run to Thatcher in a trance, completely forgetting to stop at the station. The fireman had to pour water on his head to snap him out of it. The engineer decided not to tell anyone about the ghost, fearing for his job, but he was plagued by the curiosity. Finally, he confided the story to a close friend who was a fellow engineer. To his surprise, the friend had heard about the ghost before. The ghost's appearance on the train was by no means uncommon. No one knew who the woman had been in life, but she always appeared on that stretch of track after dark, beckoning to the men on the railroad crew with a bewitching smile. Sometimes, said his friend, sometimes she would come right into the train. "Better not tell your wife about it," his friend advised. The engineer never did. Number 2. Connecticut Yankee, a Connecticut folktale. Now, here in the South, we do not approve of your so-called Connecticut Yankee peddlers. So when one appeared in the yard of my tavern, I was not of a mind to give him room for the night. He was a scrawny fellow with a mop of white hair and a withered face. He did not seem like a crafty Yankee peddler. He looked more like a grandfather on his last legs. Surely this Connecticut Yankee had no harm in him. Curiosity being my downfall, as my wife would be the first to tell you, I was keen to see a real Yankee trick, so I told him that he might have lodgings for the night if he could play a Yankee trick, before he left. Well, he promised me the trick, but he said he was tired and went directly to bed. The next morning, everything went wrong. My yard boy never showed up. I was forced to care for the horses while my wife cooked breakfast. Well, I finally got inside. My wife was laying over a table full of the peddler's wares. She was fingering a coverlet, which matched the ones we had upstairs. The peddler named a ridiculously low price, and my wife nodded eagerly. Just then, one of our other customers called me to his table to pay his bill, so I did not see the peddler finalize the sale. It was only after the peddler had called for his buggy, paid for his room, and begun to drive away, that I suddenly remembered his promise. "Peddler," I called, "what about the Yankee trick you promised? I did not see any trick." "You will," he said, whipping up his horse. Just then, my wife stuck her head out of one of the rooms upstairs. "Harry," she cried, "that sneaky Yankee just sold me the cover from off his bed." Number 1. First things first. A Vermont tall tale. Well, the spring floods here in Vermont are mighty fierce, don't you know? One young farmer named Tom got trapped one year when the river started rising near his place. He watched the water creep up his front porch, then through the front door, and then on up the steps until he and his wife were trapped in their upstairs bedroom. "Looks like we're going to have to get out on the roof, Mildred," he told his wife, who was knitting placidly by the bed as their chicken coop drifted away past the window with all the chickens squawking like there was no tomorrow. Mildred put down her knitting, grabbed the end of a rope attached to the side of the hen house, and secured it to the shutter next to the window. Then she sat down in her rocker, picked up her knitting, and said, "Whatever you think best, dear, or perhaps the bed will float." At that moment, Tom and Mildred heard voices shouting to them from outside the window, and up rode their next-door neighbors in their old boat. "All your cows are safe over at our place," called Fred. "They came running up our hill when the water started rising, and your horse just swam past us on the way here. We thought we should come and get you before your house floated away, too." "Oh, that's mighty nice of you," said Tom, as the water came lapping in through the bedroom door. "We thought we'd have to spend the night on the roof, don't you know." "Or float on over to your place on the bed," Mildred added, folding up her knitting, rescuing the cat from the top of the bedstead, and handing both out the window to her neighbors. She climbed through after them and sat in the boat next to the neighbor's wife. Tom was halfway out the window himself when he was struck by a thought. "Golly, Mildred, we nearly left without Grandma's moonshine. How in the heck are we going to celebrate our rescue without it?" So saying, he ducked back through the window and swam underwater all the way down to the cellar to fetch a couple of kegs of moonshine. Once the booze was safely in the boat, Tom climbed in after it with 4 mugs clutched in his hands. First things first, as everyone in the boat agreed. Tom poured the moonshine into the mugs and handed them around. Then he raised the mug and said, "To Fred and Mary, the best dang neighbors a feller ever had." Mildred echoed the toast, and everyone drank to the rescuers as the rowboat bobbed merrily along the top of the roof. Fred felt called upon to respond. He rose up and stood on top of the bow of the boat. And as he climbed up the bow, the boat started rocking and pitching like a frisky kitten, and the cat fell overboard. Mary dove in after it, and they both came up yowling and sputtering. "Here's to Tom and Mildred," Fred said, reaching out a hand to haul Mary back into the boat. As they drank the second toast, the rope holding the chicken coop broke as it floated downstream, hens squawking protests all the way downstream. After everyone had been toasted half a dozen times, they decided the rescue had been properly celebrated for the moment. Fred picked up the oars again, unhooked the boat from the chimney, and rowed crookedly downstream, following the squawking chickens. They found a chicken coop stuck up against a large pine tree. Tom tied the coop to the back of the boat while Mildred swarmed her way clear to the top of the tree to rescue the rooster. Then Fred rowed Tom and Mildred to safety while Mary poured them all another drink of Grandma's moonshine. All in all, it was as fine a rescue as ever was made, they all agreed afterward. And the best save of the day was Grandma's moonshine, don't you know?